I accidentally overheard my son's conversation. Her house is worth $550,000. Let's make her sign it over and we'll sell it. I quietly left and didn't say a word. A week later, Good day, dear listeners. It's Larissa again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I had always considered myself blessed. At 72, I lived in the house Richard and I had bought 40 years ago in a quiet Portland suburb. After he passed 5 years back, the mortgage was paid off, and the property, now worth $550,000 according to the latest assessment, was my security, my legacy. I imagined leaving it to my son Daniel someday, never questioning that he'd cherish it the way I did. Daniel had always been my pride. He married Jessica 3 years ago, and though I found her a bit distant, I attributed it to different generations having different ways. They visited every few weeks, always friendly, always asking how I was managing alone. Jessica would comment on the garden, Daniel would check the furnace. It seemed like love. That Tuesday afternoon changed everything. They had come for dinner. I was in the kitchen preparing coffee when I realized I'd forgotten the cream in the garage fridge. As I walked down the hallway, I heard their voices from the living room. Low, urgent, conspiratorial. Something in the tone made me stop. Her house is worth $550,000, Jessica said. We need to make her sign it over now before she gets any older. Then we sell it. My hand froze on the doorknob. I don't know, Jess. Daniel's voice was uncertain, weak. Don't be stupid, she snapped. She's got maybe 10 good years left. We can't wait. We have debts, Daniel. Real debts. This house is sitting here doing nothing. But where would she go? That's not our problem. A nursing home, an apartment, somewhere cheap. She doesn't need all this space. We need this money now. I stood there, unable to breathe, unable to process what I was hearing. This was my son, my only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father died, working double shifts as a nurse to give him everything. And now he was discussing my home, my life, like it was just an asset to liquidate. What if she says no? Daniel asked. Jessica laughed, cold and sharp. She won't. You'll convince her. You're her precious son. Tell her it's for our future, for the grandchildren we'll give her someday. Old people are sentimental. She'll sign. I backed away silently, my heart hammering against my ribs. The cream was forgotten. I returned to the kitchen, hands shaking as I poured coffee I could barely hold. When I brought the tray to the living room, they were sitting apart, faces composed, smiling at me like nothing had happened. Mom, this looks wonderful, Daniel said warmly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. How long had he been planning this? How many of those concerned visits were just reconnaissance? Every question about my finances, every suggestion that the house was too much for me to handle. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Are you okay, Mom? You look pale, Jessica said, her voice dripping with false concern. Just tired, I managed. It's been a long day. They left an hour later. Daniel hugged me at the door, told me he loved me. I watched their car disappear down the street and felt something inside me harden. This was betrayal. This was my son, choosing greed over the woman who'd given him everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Richard's old chair, looking around the living room where we'd celebrated Christmases, birthdays, graduations, where Daniel had taken his first steps, where I'd cried when Richard died and somehow found the strength to go on. They wanted to take this from me. They wanted to erase my history, my independence, my dignity, all for money. But I wasn't some helpless old woman to be manipulated and discarded. By dawn, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I would be smarter than that. I would protect myself, protect what was mine. And if my own son had chosen to become my enemy, then I would treat him accordingly. The war had begun, though they didn't know it yet. The next morning, I forced myself to think clearly. Emotion wouldn't save me. Strategy would. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, just as Richard had taught me when facing any crisis. Write down the facts, assess the damage, plan the response. The facts were brutal. Daniel and Jessica saw me as an obstacle between them and $500,000. They believed I was vulnerable, easy to manipulate, too trusting to see through their scheme. They were probably right about the trusting part. I'd been blind for months, maybe years. How much debt were they in? What had driven them to this? I realized I knew almost nothing about their real financial situation. Daniel worked in sales, Jessica in marketing. They drove new cars, wore expensive clothes, took vacations. I'd assumed they were successful. Now I wondered if it was all a facade, a house of cards built on credit they couldn't repay. The fear came in waves. What if they escalated? What if they tried to have me declared incompetent? I'd read stories about elder abuse, about families who manipulated doctors, lawyers, courts. At 72, would anyone believe me over my devoted son? Would they say I was paranoid, suffering from dementia? My hands trembled as I wrote, but I kept going. I had advantages they didn't know about. First, I was completely sound of mind. My doctor had just given me a clean bill of health at my annual checkup 2 weeks ago. Second, they didn't know I'd overheard them. They thought they still had my trust. Third, I wasn't alone in the world. I had friends, neighbors, my book club, my church community. People who'd known me for decades and would vouch for my competence. But I needed more than character witnesses. I needed legal protection. I picked up the phone and called Margaret Chen, a woman from my book club whose daughter was an estate planning attorney. Margaret answered on the second ring, warm and cheerful as always. We chatted briefly before I asked as casually as I could about her daughter's practice. "Oh, Lisa's wonderful with elder law," Margaret said. "She helps seniors protect their assets, set up trusts, all that complicated legal stuff." "Why do you ask, Helen? Are you thinking about estate planning?" "Just being practical," I said lightly. "At my age, it's wise to have things in order." Margaret gave me Lisa's number immediately. "Tell her I sent you. She'll take good care of you." After we hung up, I stared at the number for a long moment. Calling an attorney felt like crossing a line, admitting that my relationship with my son was beyond repair. But what relationship did we really have if he was plotting to steal my home? I dialed. Lisa Chen had her mother's warmth, but with a professional edge that inspired confidence. I explained that I wanted to discuss protecting my assets and ensuring my wishes were legally secure. She had an opening that Friday at 2 o'clock. I took it. The rest of the week, I maintained normal routines. I went to the grocery store, attended my water aerobics class, had lunch with friends. But every spare moment, I thought, planned, prepared. I gathered documents, the deed to my house, bank statements, investment records, my will. I wanted Lisa to see the complete picture. Daniel called Wednesday evening. "Just checking on you, Mom. You seemed tired when we visited." His voice was so familiar, so full of false warmth. I wanted to scream at him, to demand how he could betray me like this. Instead, I kept my voice steady. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy with my activities. Not too busy, I hope. You need to take care of yourself." The irony was suffocating. "I am taking care of myself, Daniel. Don't worry. Jessica and I were thinking we should sit down soon and talk about your finances. Make sure everything's in order. Maybe help you simplify things." There it was. The first move. They were getting impatient. "That's thoughtful," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "But I actually have everything well organized. Richard taught me to be very thorough." A pause. "Well, if you ever need help?" I'll let you know. Good night, Daniel. I hung up and sat in the darkening kitchen, my heart racing. They were starting their campaign. But I was ready. I had 4 days until my meeting with Lisa Chen. 4 days to build my armor before the real battle began. Lisa Chen's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel that made me feel both intimidated and determined. Her assistant offered me coffee, and I sat in the waiting room clutching my folder of documents like a lifeline. Mrs. Patterson? Lisa appeared, younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Please come in. Her office was professional but warm, with family photos on the desk. I noticed one of her with Margaret, both laughing at what looked like a wedding. It helped me relax. So, Lisa said, settling into her chair, my mother mentioned you're interested in estate planning and asset protection. Tell me what's on your mind. I'd rehearsed this moment, but when I opened my mouth, the words came tumbling out. The overheard conversation, Daniel's increasing questions about my finances, Jessica's coldness, my fears about what they might do. Lisa listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mrs. Patterson, Helen, I'm going to be direct with you. What you're describing is a very real threat, and I'm glad you came to me before they made their move. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. First, we'll create a revocable living trust. You'll transfer the house into it, with you as the trustee. This means you maintain complete control during your lifetime, but the property is protected from certain types of manipulation. It also avoids probate, which will save your heirs, whoever you choose, time and money. But Daniel would still inherit? I asked, unsure how I felt about that. That's your choice entirely. The trust can name anyone as beneficiary. You can also include a no-contest clause. If anyone challenges the trust, they automatically forfeit their inheritance. It discourages legal attacks. She continued outlining the strategy. We'd also establish a durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances, naming someone I trusted completely, not Daniel. We'd document my mental competency with a formal evaluation. We'd create a paper trail showing I'd made these decisions freely, with full capacity, and with legal counsel. This will cost money, Lisa said gently, but it's worth every penny. How much? Around $5,000 for everything. I didn't hesitate. Do it. We spent 2 hours going through details. Lisa explained everything patiently, making sure I understood each document. By the time I left her office, I had a plan, a timeline, and something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But the universe wasn't done testing me. That Sunday, Daniel and Jessica showed up unannounced. I was in the garden when I heard the car. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to smile as they walked around the side of the house. Surprise, Daniel called. We brought bagels. We sat on the patio, and I poured orange juice with hands that only trembled slightly. The conversation started pleasantly enough. Weather, neighborhood gossip, Jessica's new project at work. Then Daniel shifted gears. Mom, I've been thinking, this house is a lot for you to manage. Have you ever considered downsizing? Maybe a nice condo? Something with no maintenance? Here we go, I thought. I managed just fine, I said mildly. Jessica leaned forward. But Helen, wouldn't it be liberating? No yard work, no repairs. Plus, you'd free up equity. You could travel, enjoy yourself. I enjoy myself here. But think about it, Daniel pressed. You could help us out too. Jessica and I have been looking at houses, starting a family soon. If you sold this place, you wouldn't need all that money. You could live comfortably in something smaller and help us with a down payment. It would be an investment in your future grandchildren. The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. That's a big decision, I said carefully. I'd need to think about it. Consult with professionals. Jessica's smile tightened. What professionals? We're your family. Financial advisors. My attorney. Daniel's head snapped up. Attorney? Since when do you have an attorney? I met his eyes. Since I decided to be responsible about my estate planning. At my age, it's wise to have everything in order. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Jessica and Daniel exchanged a glance, quick, sharp, alarmed. They'd thought I was a naive old woman. Now they weren't sure. What kind of estate planning? Jessica asked, her voice tight. The usual. Trusts, power of attorney, making sure my wishes are clear and legally protected. I watched them absorb this, saw the calculations happening behind their eyes. Their easy target had just become complicated. Daniel forced a laugh. That's great, Mom. Really responsible. We just want to make sure whoever's advising you has your best interests at heart. Oh, they do, I said softly. I'm very certain of that. They left 20 minutes later, the bagels barely touched. Through the window, I watched them sit in their car, arguing. Jessica was gesticulating angrily. Daniel looked pale. I'd fired the first shot, and they knew it. The war was no longer hidden. The following week moved quickly. Lisa Chen worked with impressive efficiency. On Tuesday, I underwent a cognitive evaluation with Dr. Rayburn, a neuropsychologist Lisa recommended. He put me through hours of tests, memory, reasoning, decision-making capacity. When finished, he smiled. Mrs. Patterson, you're sharp as a tack. Anyone who questions your mental competency would be laughed out of court. His official report, which Lisa received immediately, stated I was of completely sound mind, with no signs of cognitive impairment, undue influence, or diminished capacity. It was ammunition, and we both knew it. Thursday, I signed the trust documents in Lisa's office. My house, my savings, my investments, all transferred into the Helen Patterson Revocable Living Trust. I remained trustee with complete control, but the assets were now legally protected. I also signed a power of attorney naming Margaret Chen's husband, Robert, a retired accountant I'd known for 20 years. Not my son. Not family. How are you feeling? Lisa asked as I set down the pen. Powerful, I said, and meant it. But power comes with a price. Daniel called that evening, his voice strained. Mom, we need to talk. Can we come over tomorrow? Of course, I said, though my heart was already racing. They arrived at 10 in the morning, both dressed formally, faces set. This wasn't a casual visit. Jessica carried a leather folder. They meant business. We sat in the living room, and the pretense dropped immediately. What the hell are you doing? Jessica demanded, her voice sharp as glass. I'm sorry? I kept my voice level. Don't play dumb, Helen. We know you've been meeting with lawyers, moving your assets around. What are you trying to pull? Daniel looked miserable, but said nothing, letting his wife be the attack dog. I'm protecting my interests, I said calmly, as any responsible person would. Protecting them from what? From us? We're your family. Are you? The words escaped before I could stop them. Jessica's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I could have backed down, should have, perhaps. But something in me broke. I heard you. That Tuesday you came for dinner. I heard you planning to steal my house. The silence was deafening. Daniel went white. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. You were eavesdropping, she finally spat. In my own home? Hardly. You were plotting in my own living room. Daniel found his voice. Mom, you misunderstood. Did I? You wanted me to sign over my house so you could sell it and dump me in a nursing home. Those were Jessica's exact words. We were just talking, Jessica shouted. Just discussing possibilities. You can't punish us for a private conversation. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself. Jessica stood, her face flushed with rage. You ungrateful old woman. After everything we've done for you, all those visits, all that time spent checking on you. You mean reconnaissance missions to assess my assets? Daniel stood too, hands shaking. Mom, please, we're in trouble. Real financial trouble. We owe over $200,000 in debts, credit cards, loans, Jessica's failed business. We're desperate. Finally, the truth. And your solution was to steal from me? I asked quietly. Not steal, we're your family. You'd be helping us. Jessica's voice turned wheedling. We could all benefit. Sell this house, split the money. You don't need all this space. We could find you a nice apartment, visit all the time. No, you're being selfish. I'm being self-preserving. There's a difference. Jessica's mask dropped completely, revealing pure venom. You'll regret this. We could make your life very difficult, Helen. We could tell people you're losing your mind, that you're paranoid. We could challenge anything you've signed, claim diminished capacity. Go ahead and try. My voice was ice. I have documentation from a neuropsychologist certifying my complete mental competency. I have legal counsel. I have witnesses to my decision-making capacity. And I have friends who will testify that I made these choices freely and rationally. I stood, facing them both. You will never get this house. You will never manipulate me. And if you threaten me again, I'll get a restraining order. Daniel's face crumpled. Mom, get out. Mom, please, get out of my house now. They left, Jessica slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched them through the curtain, saw Jessica screaming at Daniel in the driveway before they drove away. Then I sat down and shook for 20 minutes straight. I'd won this battle, but I was exhausted, emotionally decimated. This was my son, my only child, and I'd just thrown him out of my house. For 3 days, I disconnected. I didn't answer the phone. I stayed home, watched old movies, let myself grieve the relationship I'd thought I had with Daniel. Margaret came over with soup and sat with me without asking questions. It was exactly what I needed. By Monday, I felt stronger, ready for whatever came next. The letter arrived on Wednesday, dropped through the mail slot while I was having breakfast. Cream-colored envelope, Daniel's handwriting. My stomach tightened, but I opened it. Dear Mom, I can't stop thinking about our last conversation. You're right. We handled everything wrong. Jessica and I were desperate, and we let that cloud our judgment. But I'm still your son. I still love you. I'm begging you to give me another chance. I know we hurt you. I know we broke your trust. But hasn't our relationship meant anything? Don't I deserve forgiveness? You raised me to believe family comes first, that we work through problems together. Please, let's talk. Let me prove we can fix this. I'm ashamed of what we considered doing. But Mom, I'm drowning. We're about to lose everything. Our car, our apartment, maybe even our marriage. I came to you because I didn't know where else to turn. Isn't that what parents are for? You don't have to give us money or sign over your house. Just please don't shut me out completely. I'm your son. Doesn't that count for something? Love always? Daniel, I read it 3 times, feeling the familiar tug of maternal guilt. He was my son. I'd raised him, loved him, sacrificed for him. And now he was in pain, asking for help. But this was manipulation, wrapped in sentiment. Every line calculated to pull my heartstrings, to make me the villain for protecting myself. The letter never actually apologized for the plot itself, only for getting caught, for handling it wrong. It framed their betrayal as a mistake born from desperation, as if that excused planning to steal my home. And that last line, doesn't that count for something, was the real message. You owe me. I'm your son, so you're obligated to save me, even at your own expense. I set the letter aside and didn't respond. 2 days later, Jessica called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Helen, please don't hang up. Her voice was different, softer, almost humble. I owe you an apology, a real one. I waited. I've been a terrible daughter-in-law. I pushed Daniel into this. I was desperate. scared about our debts, and I convinced myself that you wouldn't really mind, that you'd want to help us. I was wrong. Completely, horribly wrong. Yes, you were, I said quietly. I grew up poor, Helen. Really poor. And when I married Daniel, I thought I'd finally have security. But I made bad decisions, started a business that failed, racked up debt. I was terrified of going back to being poor. That fear made me monstrous. She sounded genuine. Almost. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, she continued. But could we maybe start over? Could I prove that I can be better? Daniel loves you so much, and it's destroying him that you won't talk to him. Jessica, I said, I understand fear. I understand desperation. But I don't understand plotting to take someone's home and security. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I know, you're right. Is there any way back from this? I don't know, I said honestly. I need time. Of course, take all the time you need. Just don't give up on us completely. Please. After she hung up, I sat thinking. Were they genuinely remorseful? Or was this another strategy? The soft approach after the hard approach failed. I called Lisa Chen. They're regrouping, she said immediately. Classic pattern. First they threaten, then they beg. They're looking for any opening, any weakness. What should I do? Exactly what you're doing. Maintain boundaries. Don't engage emotionally. And Helen, trust your instincts. You know your son better than anyone. That weekend, I went to church for the first time in months. Father Michael gave a sermon about forgiveness and boundaries, and afterward, I found myself in his office, telling him everything. You're not wrong to protect yourself, he said gently. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean making yourself vulnerable to people who've proven they'll hurt you. But he's my son. And you're his mother, which means he owes you respect, honesty, and care, not manipulation and theft. I also talked to my book club, to my water aerobics friends, to neighbors who'd known me for decades. I didn't give details, just said Daniel and I were having difficulties. The support was overwhelming. You always seemed like such a devoted mother, Margaret said. But sometimes our kids need to learn that actions have consequences. Robert, her husband, was more blunt. Elder financial abuse is a crime, Helen. What they attempted is prosecutable. You're being kinder than they deserve. By the end of the week, I felt fortified. I had community. I had support. I had people who saw me as a person, not just a bank account. Daniel and Jessica were quiet, watching from a distance. But I knew this wasn't over. Predators don't give up easily when they smell money. They came on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after our confrontation. I was reading in the garden when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw them on the porch. Daniel holding flowers, Jessica with a bakery box, both smiling tentatively. My first instinct was to not answer, but avoiding them forever wasn't a solution. I opened the door. Mom, Daniel said, extending the bouquet. Can we talk, please? I let them in, wary as a rabbit scenting wolves. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd overheard their original plot. The irony wasn't lost on me. We've done a lot of thinking, Daniel began, about what we did, what we almost did, and we want to make it right. Jessica nodded, her expression earnest. Helen, I've been seeing a therapist, working through my issues with money, with fear, with control. I'm learning that what we planned was deeply wrong, not just wrong, abusive. That's good, I said carefully. We're also in a debt management program, Daniel added. We've cut up our credit cards, created a budget, sold Jessica's car. We're taking responsibility for our mistakes instead of looking for shortcuts. They seemed genuine, humbled, reformed. I'm glad you're making changes, I said. We were hoping, Jessica said softly, that maybe we could rebuild our relationship. Slowly. We're not asking for anything except the chance to prove we've changed. Daniel leaned forward. Mom, you're my only family. I can't lose you. These past weeks without talking to you have been hell. I miss you. My heart ached. This was my son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, sent to college. Part of me wanted to believe this was real, that we could heal. I miss you too, I admitted. Relief flooded Daniel's face. So we can start over? Fresh slate? It's not that simple. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. We understand, Jessica said quickly. We're willing to do whatever it takes. We could do family therapy, regular visits, whatever you need to feel safe. That's reasonable, I said slowly. Great! Daniel smiled and something in it felt off, too bright, too quick. So, one thing that would really help rebuild trust. Could you maybe reconsider the trust arrangement? With the house? There it was. What do you mean? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. Jessica took over, her voice gentle, persuasive. It's just that it feels like such a barrier between us, you know? Like you're saying you don't trust us. And how can we rebuild if there's this legal wall? The trust protects me, I said. But from what? From us? If we're really starting over, truly reconciling, doesn't it seem contradictory to keep that protection in place? Daniel's voice was still soft, but there was an edge now. It's like you're saying you forgive us, but you don't really. Forgiveness and legal protection are separate things. Are they, though? Jessica leaned in, her eyes intense. Helen, here's the thing. Daniel and I want to prove we've changed. But we can't do that if you've locked everything down legally. It's insulting. It's like you're treating us as criminals. You plotted to steal my house. We talked about it, Jessica snapped, then caught herself, softening her tone. We talked about it in a moment of desperation. We never actually did anything. And now you're punishing us forever? I'm protecting myself. By shutting us out? By treating your own son like a thief? Daniel's voice rose. Mom, this is crazy. We're your family. We love you. And you're acting like we're strangers trying to rob you. You were going to rob me. We were going to ask for help. Jessica stood, her patience clearly exhausted. That's what families do. They help each other. But instead, you've put up walls, hired lawyers, made yourself untouchable. What kind of mother does that? The mask was slipping fast. The kind who was almost conned out of her home, I said, standing too. Daniel stood, his face flushed. You know what? Fine. Keep your precious house. Keep your money. But don't expect us to keep playing this game where we grovel and you lord your wealth over us. I never asked you to grovel. You wanted us to. Jessica's voice was pure venom now. You wanted us to beg, to humiliate ourselves so you could feel powerful. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand that we need something you have. Get out. Gladly, Jessica spat. Come on, Daniel. Your mother's made her choice. Daniel looked at me, his face twisted with anger and something else, desperation. If you do this, if you really cut us off, don't expect us at your deathbed. Don't expect us at your funeral. You'll die alone in this house you love so much. The words hit like a physical blow. Then I'll die alone, I said quietly. Now get out. They stormed out, Jessica slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I stood in the empty living room, shaking, listening to their car screech away. For a moment, fear swamped me. Daniel's final threat echoed in my head. Dying alone. No family. No one. But then something shifted. That fear transformed, crystallized into pure resolve. I would rather die alone with my dignity intact than live at the mercy of people who saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Again. This time, I wouldn't forget. 6 weeks passed in uneasy silence. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Barnett and Associates. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Mrs. Patterson, we represent Daniel Patterson and Jessica Patterson in the matter of a contested estate and allegations of diminished mental capacity. Our clients have expressed deep concern about your recent erratic behavior, questionable financial decisions, and potential vulnerability to undue influence. We are formally requesting an independent evaluation of your mental competency and a review of all recent legal documents, including the trust arrangement established under suspicious circumstances. They were actually doing it, trying to have me declared incompetent. I called Lisa Chen immediately. I was wondering when this would come, she said grimly. They're desperate. This is their final play. Can they win? Not a chance, but we need to crush this completely so they never try again. Are you ready for that? Yes. Lisa scheduled an emergency hearing for the following week. The judge would review the competency challenge, examine all evidence, and make a determination. It would be public record. It would be final. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what might happen, what they might claim, how I'd respond. But when morning came, I dressed carefully in a navy suit, pinned up my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a competent, dignified woman who refused to be victimized. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined from TV shows. Daniel and Jessica sat with their attorney, a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit. They didn't look at me. Daniel kept his eyes on the table, but Jessica stared straight ahead, her jaw tight with determination. Judge Warren, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, reviewed the documents with meticulous care. The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of papers. Then she looked up. Mr. Barnett, you're alleging Mrs. Patterson lacks the mental capacity to make financial decisions. On what basis? Barnett stood, smoothing his tie. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson is 72 years old. She recently, without consulting her family, transferred substantial assets into a trust, changed her power of attorney, and severed relationship with her only son. This represents a dramatic departure from her previous behavior and suggests either diminished capacity or undue influence from third parties. Mrs. Patterson's age is not evidence of incompetence, Judge Warren said dryly. What else do you have? We have testimony from her son and daughter-in-law about recent memory lapses, confusion, and paranoid behavior. Paranoid? Lisa stood. Your Honor, may I present evidence? She handed the judge several documents. This is a cognitive evaluation from Dr. Rayburn, conducted 6 weeks ago. It shows Mrs. Patterson has no cognitive impairment whatsoever. This is testimony from her physician of 15 years. This is testimony from a priest, neighbors, and friends, all attesting to her complete mental clarity and sound judgment. Judge Warren read carefully, her expression growing more skeptical with each page. These are quite comprehensive. Dr. Rayburn's evaluation is particularly detailed. It explicitly states that Mrs. Patterson demonstrated superior cognitive function for her age. Your Honor, Lisa continued, the reason for Mrs. Patterson's legal protections isn't paranoia or incompetence, it's self-defense. May I present additional evidence? She handed over more papers. This is a written statement from Mrs. Patterson, describing a conversation she overheard in which her son and daughter-in-law discussed plans to pressure her into signing over her house, then selling it, and placing her in a nursing home. We also have documentation of subsequent threats and harassment, including Mr. Patterson's statement that his mother would die alone if she didn't comply with their wishes. The courtroom went dead silent. I could hear someone's breath catch, see the court reporter's fingers pause over the keys. Judge Warren's expression turned ice cold. Mr. Barnett, did you know about this? Barnett looked shocked, his face flushing red as he glanced at Daniel and Jessica, who'd gone pale. Your Honor, my clients didn't mention— Your clients, the judge interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade, are attempting to use this court to accomplish through legal manipulation what they couldn't accomplish through direct coercion. Mrs. Chen, does your client wish to pursue elder abuse charges? Not at this time, Your Honor. She simply wants her competency affirmed and to be left in peace. Judge Warren looked at Daniel and Jessica with open disgust. I find absolutely no evidence of diminished mental capacity. Mrs. Patterson is clearly of sound mind and acted with complete rationality in protecting her assets from family members who demonstrated predatory intent. She turned to Barnett. This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering both petitioners to have no contact with Mrs. Patterson except through legal counsel. Any further harassment will result in restraining orders and potential criminal charges. Do I make myself clear? Daniel stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly. Your Honor, please, she's my mother, who you attempted to exploit and defraud, Judge Warren snapped. Sit down, Mr. Patterson. You should be grateful your mother is more merciful than I would be. If I had my way, you'd be facing criminal charges right now. Jessica started crying, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. I could see it in her eyes across the courtroom, pure, impotent fury. Her hands were clenched into fists on the table, her whole body rigid with anger. Furthermore, Judge Warren continued, I'm entering this finding into public record. Any future attempts to challenge Mrs. Patterson's competency will be viewed in light of this ruling. This matter is closed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Lisa turned to me, her face glowing with professional satisfaction. It's over, Helen. They can't touch you now. That judge absolutely demolished them. I watched Daniel and Jessica emerge, Barnett talking to them urgently, clearly distancing himself. Jessica was still crying. Daniel looked broken, defeated, 10 years older than when he'd walked in. For a moment, I felt something like grief. That was my son. I'd lost him, maybe forever. But then I remembered his words, "You'll die alone." And I remembered Jessica's venom. Bitter old woman. And I felt nothing but relief. Thank you, Lisa, I said, for everything. You did this yourself, she replied. You were brave enough to protect yourself when it mattered most. Not every person in your situation has that courage. I drove home alone to my house, my sanctuary, my hard-won peace. The war was over. I'd won. The legal victory was absolute. But I wanted more than just protection. I wanted to ensure Daniel and Jessica could never threaten anyone else this way, and that there would be consequences for what they'd tried to do. 2 days after the hearing, I met with Lisa again. I want to revise my will and trust, I said. Completely. We spent the afternoon making changes. Daniel was removed as beneficiary. Instead, the bulk of my estate would go to charities. The Children's Hospital, where I'd worked as a nurse, a scholarship fund for low-income students, the local women's shelter. I set aside a small amount for Daniel, $10,000, with a note that said simply, "This is what you get for trying to steal what I would have given freely." I also added an ironclad no-contest clause. If Daniel challenged the trust, he'd lose even that $10,000. Are you sure? Lisa asked gently. This is final. I've never been more sure of anything. The documents were signed, notarized, and filed within the week. I also had Lisa send copies to Daniel and Jessica's last known address, certified mail, return receipt requested. I wanted them to know exactly what they'd lost. But there was more to do. I'd learned from courthouse gossip that Barnett and Associates had dropped Daniel and Jessica as clients immediately after the hearing. Apparently, they'd lied to their attorney about the circumstances, and he'd been blindsided by the evidence we presented. He was furious about the damage to his reputation and had sent them a bill for services rendered that they had no way to pay. The courthouse transcript became public record. Word spread through our community quickly, the Pattersons who'd tried to steal from Daniel's elderly mother. It became a cautionary tale. Without legal representation and facing mounting debts, their situation deteriorated rapidly. I heard through Margaret, whose gossip network was better than the FBI, that their landlord had evicted them for non-payment. They'd moved into a cheap apartment across town. Jessica's car had been repossessed. Daniel had lost his sales job. Apparently, his employer had been in the courtroom gallery and decided he didn't want someone capable of elder abuse representing the company. The story had spread to Daniel's professional network. Job applications went unanswered. His LinkedIn profile gathered digital dust. Who wants to hire someone who tried to defraud his own mother? Jessica's business bankruptcy was finalized, leaving them with ruined credit and over $200,000 in discharged debt that would haunt them for years. No bank would touch them. They were struggling to afford groceries, juggling multiple part-time jobs just to cover rent. Part of me, a small, buried part, felt sympathy. They were suffering. But then I'd remember their plan, their manipulation, the threat that I'd die alone, the coldness in Jessica's voice when she'd called me a bitter old woman, Daniel's willingness to betray everything I'd sacrificed for him. They'd tried to destroy me. They'd failed. Now they were experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. 2 months after the hearing, I received a handwritten letter from Daniel. Not a legal document this time, just notebook paper, tear-stained and wrinkled. Mom, you were right about everything. I was weak. I let Jessica convince me to do something monstrous. I betrayed you in the worst way possible. We've lost everything. Our home, our cars, my job, our reputation. Jessica left me last week. She said I was worthless, that this was all my fault for not being able to handle you. She blamed me for everything, said I should have been smarter, more convincing. She's gone back to her parents. I'm alone now. Living in a studio apartment I can barely afford, working at a warehouse for minimum wage. Every day I wake up knowing I destroyed the most important relationship in my life for money I never got. The irony isn't lost on me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I understand what I did. I understand that you would have helped me if I'd just been honest, if I'd asked instead of trying to steal. But I was a coward. I chose the easy, dishonest path, and I destroyed everything. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Daniel, I read it several times. There was no manipulation this time, no asks, no angles, just genuine, broken remorse. Too late. I folded the letter carefully and filed it away in my safe. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Regret doesn't undo betrayal. I did, however, send a copy to my attorney, just in case. Documentation. Always document. Meanwhile, I heard that Jessica had tried to contact her old friends, looking for sympathy and possibly financial help. They'd all heard what happened. Doors closed. Invitations stopped coming. She was toxic now, a cautionary tale about greed and manipulation. Life moved forward, and it moved beautifully. I redecorated the house, turning Daniel's old bedroom into an art studio. I'd always wanted to paint. Now I had time, money, and peace. I traveled. A cruise to Alaska, a trip to Italy I'd dreamed about for years. I used my money to enjoy life exactly as I pleased. Each destination was a celebration of my freedom, my independence, my refusal to be a victim. I grew closer to my community. Margaret and Robert became like family. Father Michael and I had long conversations about forgiveness and boundaries. My book club became a source of joy and intellectual stimulation. I was 72 years old when this began, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. One afternoon, months later, I was in the garden when I saw a car slow down in front of my house. Daniel was driving. He didn't stop, didn't get out, just looked at the house, his childhood home, with an expression of such profound loss that I almost felt something. Almost. Then he drove away, and I went back to my roses. I'd built a life where I was surrounded by people who valued me as a person, not a bank account, where I made decisions freely, without fear, where I was happy. Daniel had chosen differently. He'd have to live with that choice, just as I lived with mine. And I was living very well indeed. The victory was complete. Not just legal, but moral, emotional, and practical. I'd protected everything: my home, my assets, my dignity, my future. And they'd lost everything. Not just the money they'd coveted, but their reputations, their relationships, their self-respect. Justice, it turned out, was real. A year passed. Then two. My life transformed in ways I'd never imagined. The house that Daniel and Jessica had tried to steal became my haven. I hired a handyman named Tom, a retired veteran, to help with maintenance. He was honest, kind, and became a good friend. We'd have coffee on the porch and talk about everything from politics to grandchildren. His, not mine. I took art classes at the community college and discovered a genuine talent for watercolors. My paintings, mostly landscapes and florals, started selling at a local gallery. Not for much, but enough that I donated the proceeds to the scholarship fund I'd established. Every semester, some deserving student got help with tuition because I'd turned my pain into something productive. Margaret and Robert included me in everything: family dinners, holidays, their daughter's wedding. Their grandchildren called me Aunt Helen. I had a family, just not the one I'd been born into. I joined a women's investment group and learned to grow my money smartly. The house appreciated to $625,000. My portfolio flourished. I was building wealth not for an ungrateful heir, but for causes I believed in, and for my own security and joy. I dated, briefly. A widower named Frank from church took me to dinner a few times. It didn't develop into romance, but it reminded me I was still a woman, with desires, with life, with possibilities. At 74, I felt younger than I had at 70. My health was excellent. I did yoga, walked daily, ate well. Dr. Morrison said I had the vitality of someone 10 years younger. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she told me. What I was doing was living for myself. No guilt, no manipulation, no one treating me as a resource to be drained. I heard about Daniel and Jessica only through occasional whispers in the community grapevine. Jessica had moved back to Ohio with her parents, broke and bitter. According to Margaret's sources, she'd tried to start another business with her father's money and failed again. Her parents had cut her off. She was working retail, living in their basement at 37, blaming everyone but herself for her circumstances. Daniel was still in Portland, but barely. He'd moved from the studio apartment to an even cheaper place in a rough neighborhood. The warehouse job had given him a permanent back injury. Now he did gig work, driving for rideshare apps, delivering food, barely scraping by. I ran into his former boss at a charity event. "I felt bad about firing Daniel," he admitted, "until I heard the full story of what he tried to do to you. That kind of character flaw. He'd have eventually tried something similar with us." Daniel's old friends had abandoned him. The few mutual acquaintances we still had reported that he'd become withdrawn, bitter, aged beyond his 42 years. He blamed Jessica for everything, told anyone who'd listen that she'd corrupted him, manipulated him. But I knew the truth. Daniel had always been weak. Jessica hadn't created his character flaws. She'd simply exploited them. He'd chosen greed over integrity, chose the easy con over honest conversation with his mother. Now he was living with those choices. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but no guilt either. I hadn't caused this. He had. I'd simply refused to be his victim. One Sunday after church, Father Michael pulled me aside. "I saw Daniel," he said quietly. "He was at the soup kitchen. In line, not volunteering." "Oh," I said. "He asked about you, if you still came to this parish." "What did you tell him?" "That you're thriving, that you're one of our most active and generous members, that you seem genuinely happy." He paused. He started crying. I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, not quite vindication, something in between. "Did he ask you to reach out to me?" I asked. "No. He said he knows he has no right to ask anything of you ever again. He just wanted to know you were okay." I nodded. "I am okay. Better than okay." That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My garden was in full bloom: roses, lavender, daisies. The house was quiet, peaceful, completely mine. Was I lonely sometimes? Yes. Did I occasionally wonder what life might have been like if Daniel had been the son I'd believed him to be? Of course, but regret? No, not for a second. I'd saved myself. I'd protected my independence, my dignity, my future. I'd built a life filled with genuine relationships, creative fulfillment, financial security, and peace. Daniel had gambled on greed and lost everything. I'd bet on myself and won. The scoreboard couldn't be clearer. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I raised my glass to the universe. To second acts, I whispered. And to knowing your worth. The house stood solid around me, a fortress